So welcome to our Mainstreet Masters series presented by Mainstreet SA. I'm David West, your host, and today we're talking to Gianna Murphy, the CEO of Renew Adelaide. Renew Adelaide is a small and passionate team partnering with the property industry, government and communities to find interesting vacant spaces and then connect them with entrepreneurs seeking the space. The program started in 2010 and has been so successful that recently they found a location for their 300th small business. So welcome, Gianna, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Gianna, can you tell us about the history of Renew Adelaide and how it actually came to be?
Yeah, so Renew Newcastle, don't actually know when Renew Newcastle had started, but well before Renew Adelaide. So Renew Adelaide's actually modelled on the Newcastle model through Marcus Westbury, who started that. So there was a group of young sort of 20-somethings in Adelaide. Yanto Ware was one of them. And essentially they started noticing that a lot of their friends in creative industry, particularly within music, had sort of left Adelaide to go to other states for other career opportunities and just lifestyle opportunities. So they wanted to kind of figure out how do they make sure that they keep their friends in South Australia, and then found out about the Renew Newcastle model, spoke with Marcus Westbury, and sort of started to develop the Adelaide model down in the West End due to some, really did take, not just one individual. It really was a collection of different people from property industry and, business community, creative industry, all of those sorts of things.
So really the principle of what you do is you link up with property owners and then you find the spaces and then bring it all together because you have two databases basically. You're bringing your small businesses in. So how does the process work really from the start?
Yes, it's quite a puzzle, really, for Renew Adelaide. So there's over 1,000 people that we have on an expression of interest list saying that they want to open businesses in the city of Adelaide. And then we know that there's a lot more than 1,000 individual vacancies across South Australia as a whole. So really, it's not a case of just putting a business idea into a space. It really needs to be obviously a business idea that we feel is missing, in particular precincts that we work in addition to a property owner that's actually willing to provide access to their property. So while there is a lot of vacancy, not every property owner is willing to really open their doors to look at this alternative sort of leasing strategy with Renew Adelaide. So it really does take a case of, open-minded property industry and experimental small business owners, and then Renew Adelaide kind of, piecing those puzzle bits together and placing in the right spaces.
And you've had some great success over time. I mean, I know that you put some different stores into Region Arcade. You've done in Main Streets in Rundle Street, Adelaide Arcade, pictured behind me there. You've done
Yes.
some, really, really good locations you've found, and then got the businesses started, and they get that foot traffic coming past them. So, what would be one of the best successes that you've had?
Depends on how you measure success. Some people ask me which is the most profitable, but I don't necessarily think that makes for the most successful business. I think we've had some really great long-term successes. So Port Adelaide is one area that we haven't. I mean, we started operating in Port Adelaide. Would have been kind of probably around 2015 maybe, and
Mhm.
then that was funded through Renewal SA, so through state government. And we've still got businesses that are lasting there. So Low and Slow is one example, a business that's been there for about 10 years. So there's probably a few businesses that I can think of. Ancient World's another one down in Hindley Street. So a really cool little dive bar down in Hindley Street that's also just recently celebrated its 10th year. So we've
Wow.
got a handful of really cool and interesting businesses that are spanning across multiple different industries and different types of use of spaces. So hospo, retail, office space, those sorts of things. If you measure success by longevity, then there's those examples, and then there's other examples of, I think, just really interesting uses of spaces as well. So there was one business that didn't end up converting to rent paying, but they went into, it's called Saxon Violin Film Society. They went into a council owned office space that when I walked into this office space, I went, gosh, this is daggy. What's going to go in here? I imagined it would be some sort of office type use. And then, Saxon Violins ended up coming along to the inspection, and they were a one screen cinema and bar. and ended up completely transforming that space into, cult films. Had a really interesting following, really niche audience that came along to that. So I measure the success in that way as well of, really
Yeah.
interesting ways to be able to use spaces that even Renew Adelaide, we're not we're the facilitator of ideas, but we're not the ones who come up with the ideas in the first place. So we're really very heavily reliant on that creative industry to do that.
And I think sometimes when a new business sees a new idea and wants to experiment, one of the costs, of course, to get into a shop is the expense of insurance, of shop front glass and those sort of things. And you help
Mm.
with that?
So Renew Adelaide has an insurance partner that just provides really flexible sort of terms around being able to exit out, because obviously the crux of the Renew Adelaide program is that there's not necessarily, or there's no guarantee of long-term remaining in the space. So it might be 30 days, it might be 9 years. That's sort of the maximum we've ever seen on the Renew program, 9 years. And anywhere in between that, really. So our insurance partner, Guardian, they do offer really flexible rates and really flexible terms. But that said, obviously, because the tenant is not paying any other overheads with regards to, they're not paying building insurance or council rates. Obviously, they're not paying rent while on the Renew Adelaide program. So there's, the lower of those overheads really does allow them, obviously, a little bit more capital to be able to put towards insurance. But to be honest, the insurance, I mean, just looking at our 300th venture, which is down on Hindley Street, and you can imagine Hindley Street insurance probably a little bit higher. That was about $1,600 for the year. So still a pretty reasonable rate, really. Overall.
Yeah. And what sort of are the costs they have to come up with to to commit to get started?
Mm. So we, through the application process, do ask for a budget. We're not looking for a big 60-page business plan, but we just want to understand through the budget that they've really thought through, I suppose, their forecast figures. Can they actually afford rent if and when they do get to that position of having that negotiation with the property owner? Because in some cases, that is an expectation that they may eventually reach that. And then obviously all of their initial fit out costs. That early stage of them putting that budget together helps the Renew team really identify, have they actually properly thought about this? And we don't always necessarily expect them to. I mean, that's what the Renew Adelaide program really is there to do. And we have accounting partners to support them through that as well. If you're wanting to open a burger bar, but you haven't considered the cost of buying the ingredients in the first place, well, that's obviously problematic.
Yeah.
So, that's something that we support them with. So really, it's those initial costs for fit out. We want to ensure that they've really considered what their make good requirements and make good costs are going to be if and when they do vacate. There are their own insurance costs if they're wanting to pay that, public liability, plate glass, and any other insurances. Anything with regard to compliance matters, so if we need to get development approvals, heritage approvals, etc., that's something that Renew Adelaide manages both cost-wise and process-wise. That tends to be the trickier side of things for a lot of tenants. That really stops them from moving to the next stage because they simply, or gets them into a lot of trouble because they simply don't understand that side of the process. So, while obviously having a rent-free space is wonderful, there's obviously a lot more support that goes on in the background to that as well.
So say I've set up a business with you and we've got underway. So after 6 months and we say, yep, we really want to do this, does the negotiation just then hand over to the property owner or you sort of facilitate that?
So we'll provide advice, really basic advice for the venture for them to understand. A lot of their very first sort of experiences around leasing and legal terms is really in the residential market, and commercial leasing is very, very different to residential. So really we're just sort of educating them on quite a basic level around these are the types of things that you can negotiate and this is how it differs to residential leasing. But we are sort of, obviously we sit between a property owner and a venture. We don't work for either, and we work for both at the same time. So we want to see the success of the business and long-term activation of that site. But anything that is obviously substantial legal advice, we really do recommend that they speak to a lawyer. So we've got pro bono lawyers who do work for Renew Adelaide, and we can partner with them. There's obviously the South Australian Small Business Commission as a resource as well. But yeah, it's entirely up to the tenant to make that negotiation. And if the tenant sort of feels that that particular location isn't suitable for them, then Renew Adelaide can support them to find other similar spaces across the City of Adelaide as well, or just South Australia more broadly, wherever we're aware of vacancies.
And I was going to say, you've talked about some of the successes you've had along the way. So is it quite a high success rate of businesses that actually get started and then start with you and then flourish and keep on going?
So again, if you're measuring success by longevity, then we're looking at around a 47. So last financial year, 47% graduated commercial terms into either into the spaces that we supported them in or into another space across the city. If we're not measuring the success on that basis, because of course the Renew Adelaide model is really intended to fill vacant space, it's never going to be a guarantee that that tenant does convert because in some cases there's no opportunity for them to. So something like Central Market Arcade is a really good example that's owned by council, was due to be knocked down to be redeveloped.
Yeah.
And so there was no longevity as an option really in those spaces. So the council had come to us and said, just you can have as much as you like, essentially, because we've still got some rent paying tenants in there and we want to maintain, them for as long as we can and support them. So Renew Adelaide filled a handful of those vacancies. And it meant that in those cases, we could choose businesses that didn't really have the intention of commercial viability long term. So it was a little bit more, not to say that artistic community isn't commercially viable, but it meant that we could be a little bit riskier with choosing some more interesting businesses that were doing things in creative industries like galleries and, other exhibitions, music shows, those sorts of things, because they didn't have the pressure of leasing long term. So we still measure the success in those ways. It's like, did we put them in there to hit the brief of what the owner was looking for? That's a success to us.
Yeah, and I think it shows the amazing flexibility of your program because you can cover so many different areas and different
Mm.
industries. I was going to ask, I know that the speaking of council and the government, that they're major supporters of the program. Just how valuable is that support?
It is, yeah. I mean, that the financial investment from City of Adelaide, Adelaide Economic Development Agency, who are our funders at the moment, we don't currently have South Australian state government funding. We did last financial year. We're very hopeful that it will come through mid-year budget. But it keeps our doors open entirely while there is no cost, obviously, for rent. So we're not paying the rent on behalf of the tenant. The property owners are donating a substantial amount. Last financial year, it was almost $700,000 worth of in-kind rent. So there's a
Wow.
substantial amount that's coming from private industry, in addition to all of our other pro bono supporters. But the investment that comes from government is kind of a twofold amount of importance. So the first one is paying to keep our doors open, so paying the Renew Adelaide staff to do what we do. But the second part really is around it shows investment. If you are someone within creative industry or small micro businesses and you see that your government is willing to invest in your success, I think that really gives you that confidence to be able to move forward with your idea. So I think it's even on a tokenistic level for government to be putting forward or symbolic level, I should say, for government to be putting forward funding really sends quite a strong message, I think, to the small business community.
It certainly connects them with grassroots as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They're sort of getting right into where the action is happening. And I was going to say, you're supported also by a board. You've got Nick Begakis as your chair, and you've got a board that's an amazing support. Can you just tell us what value they actually add to your program?
Yeah, so Nick is part of the furniture, well and truly. So he's been around since I'd probably say 2015 or so. So quite a long-standing board member or chairman. So Nick, at that time, when first coming onto the Renew Adelaide board, he was chosen by the previous chair, which is Steve Maras, which is the first Renew Adelaide chair and another very successful, property group within South Australia. So I think that, Nick was very specifically handpicked because of his experience and his love for South Australia and his love for small business. Nick at that time was chair of the Central Market. So again, he had very important job, but a very close connection to small business through that role as well. So, Nick is not just part of the furniture at Renew, probably part of the furniture in South Australia as well. He's got some really wonderful connections that I don't have, particularly as a younger person as well. And then the team quite, substantially younger. So he's able to really see things in a very, very different light to me. He runs in very different circles to me as well. So I think that we're a bit of yin and yang sometimes as CEO and chair that seems to work very well.
Yep, well done. And I was going to say, you've had your 300 success, recently. and that's success because you put so many different businesses together and in different properties. Where are some of the locations you put them? I know you've talked about Central Market just now in Port Adelaide. Where else have you put in small businesses?
So, well before my time, now very, very early days, there was a little bit on Prospect Road. So that was offered by Steve Morris. So where the cinema is now, used to be some older tenancies there. So there was some really cool, beautiful spaces and some businesses spotted there. Also, City of Norwood, Payneham, St. Peter's. There was 3 tenants down in that direction. So again, all before my time, but since 2010, we've had substantial and continued funding through City of Adelaide and more recently AIDA. And so obviously there is vacancy will always be existing simply because of the amount of supply that exists within the city, and also just the demand
And
for wanting to
turnover,
be.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And demand from the business sector as well, wanting to be in the city. So I can't see at any point that we won't be required to be in the City of Adelaide. But absolutely happy to go where the funding is as well. We can see that there are other areas that really could use Renew Adelaide's support. And we would be, more than happy to go anywhere.
I was going to say, often when I'm doing work in Main Street, you have property owners who are very proactive, and then you've got property owners who are not really interested in what's sort of happening on the ground. And I just wondered, how do you, when you come across a situation like that, how do you get a property owner engaged and involved in the program and get interested?
Yeah. Yes, even Renew Adelaide comes up against those same challenges, particularly because where they're asking, with their hand out asking for something for free. It's really got to be about Renew Adelaide understanding, and particularly our head of property, Harry, understanding in depth what is the motivation for that landlord. So, like I said earlier, certainly there is landlords, majority of them, who are motivated by that commercial conversion. So, we're going to do work in your space, we're going to upgrade the space, it will be more lettable, maybe our tenant will convert commercially. But of course, there are also the other owners, owners like Maya Centre or Adelaide Arcade, etc., who have vacancy and also have a lot of rent paying tenants that they need to ensure that continued vibrancy for. So it's not a great look in upper levels of my centre to be having them vacant. So they work with Renew Adelaide. We actually have had some commercial conversions there, but that wasn't the intention of the owner in working with us. So the intention was really, we've got a major department store. We could be at risk of losing that department store if we're not maintaining a certain low level vacancy across the building.
Yeah.
So Renew Adelaide really thinking, they knew they weren't going to get the next sports girl up on level 3 because that's just simply not the attitude of South Australians and how we shop these days. So, them coming to Renew Adelaide to rethink strategies for activating those upper levels. So we've put a bookshop up there, we've put a tea house, we have put a couple of clothing stores, but very, kind of younger urban, event space that was a bit of a dual kind of operation with screen printing and other things as well. So it's not Renew Adelaide putting the next sports girl up there and saying it can be done. It's Renew Adelaide really thinking about alternative types of uses for spaces that 20 years ago would have looked very different.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're doing a fabulous job all over Adelaide, and
Thank
you can
you.
see why people are certainly chasing you for trying to get you to help them out as well, because you do it so well. And I think also the way you've actually fitted out low cost fit outs, but actually very effective fit outs to present the store so they actually blend into the street. So doing it really really well. So if you would like some more information about Renew Adelaide, please log on to www.renewadelaide.com.au and you can see the program. It's really well explained, a very good website that actually shows what requirements are needed to help get things started. So thank you so much, Gianna, for your time and thank you for the valuable work you're actually doing for the city and for South Australia.
And thank you because you've been a really great supporter of Renew for, years beyond my being here. So thank you to you as well.
You're welcome.